Hey, everybody. I'm Kristen McDonald Rivet. I'm your state senator, and this is Hey Bay City.
I knew of you. Let's go all the way back. I did the video for Courtney's wedding.
You did.
Which was a random thing. Do you know how we ended up getting connected?
I do.
How did we end up
getting...
Adam Salget. Really?
Yeah.
That's how. I want to thank you guys for trusting me, because at that point, and maybe this is news, I had never really done a wedding video before this.
It's news. That's news. So
surprise!
Adam sold you as one of the genius in the business.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he absolutely
thanks,
did.
Adam
Absolutely did. That explains why you did so many things that we didn't expect, like the really quick preview video and all of these extras.
And I think I sent it to you like the next day or
did.
something like that, like 24 hours.
We got your stuff literally months before any of the other pictures.
Well, I had just started doing weddings. I had done a second shooting for a friend of mine who does weddings. And that was one of the things that he said. He was like, I try to get my photos to the couple the next day because everybody's still buzzing. They're so excited. And then you get it the next day, and now they have nice photos that they can post to social media.
Yep.
And he was like, and as a professional, immediately you impress everybody. And so the bar gets set lower. And that's absolutely the experience I had. We ended up waiting for like 4 months for our wedding photos. And as time goes on, you become more and more like, oh, these photos better be great.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that was such a delightful wedding.
It was wonderful.
Yeah,
it was beautiful, and it was our first one to get married. So,
was it?
Everybody was a little tense going into it, and we had a great time. And the Rivet family is widely known that if you invite us somewhere with a DJ, we're not coming off the dance floor until the DJ says the time is done.
It was a party. Man, it was a party. And Rodney Page is absolutely brilliant.
Brilliant.
He is just incredible. Folks at home, if you're listening and you don't know Rodney Page, you need to. Because not only does he DJ, but he plays the violin, and he will get out on that dance floor and he will play music and he will walk around between tables. It is incredible.
That wedding was 3-4 years ago. He still is the first person to wish me happy birthday on Facebook.
I know. He's such a friendly dude.
I know. He's fantastic. He's got these kids. They all play the violin. He's talented. Wonderful.
I almost want to get married again just to hire Rodney. So that was the first time that we met.
Yeah.
And then I ran around, did my social media thing for small businesses. And then I started getting involved with communities. And then you pop back on my radar as a commissioner. But you obviously have been involved in things before becoming just a commissioner. You're not just a commissioner. What kinds of things locally have you been involved with before becoming a commissioner and now obviously state senator?
Well, so I've spent most of my career, most of the work that I get paid to do, really thinking about kids' issues, whether it's in education, did a lot of work in early education policy. But the first thing I did locally was I served on the library board.
Oh, really?
I mean, I've always had this love affair with books, and
wife's dream job is to become a librarian.
You know what? That was mine too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but it takes a lot of education.
Why? Why do you say that?
So you got to go get a master's in library science.
That's
You got
true.
to and really spend a lot of time doing that. And I decided to go for the big money and major in history. But I just have always, I love what a book can do, and I love what a library means to a community, and a spot came open on the library board. I think I had images that I would get to go hang out at the Sage Library and drink tea and talk books. It's not what it is.
What did you have to do as part of the library
So
board?
it's an appointment by the County Board of Commissioners, and you basically govern the library board. So, we did budget matters, and I was on the committee that hired the head librarian we have now, who's wonderful. And but the thing about the libraries, most libraries, and especially here in Bay City, is they're places for people to go. So a lot of folks don't even go to get a book. They go as a place to be. We have a lot of kids that find it as their safe place.
Yep.
Or a place to hang out where there are other kids, places to use the computer. So it's a community hub. And I moved to Bay City because I married my husband and I love him, but I really moved because I loved Sage Library.
It is such a great library.
It's so beautiful.
I remember when I was teaching, I had probably been teaching here for 4 or 5 years, and this is a sin. Don't be like me. 4 or 5 years I was teaching here, and I had never been to either Sage or Wart Library. Like, I'd never really been in it.
Yeah.
And so I one day I said, you know what? I should go. Like, this is mandatory. This is required, especially if you're a teacher. Like, you should be familiar with the library.
At least be able to tell people
and
where they are.
I remember walking in, and it's exactly what you said. Like, yes, it's a place for books, but you have people doing homework, and you have people hanging out, and you have people who can't afford the internet and using the internet at the library, and it really becomes this community hub. And if you've never experienced the library, you got to go, because it is super, super cool.
Well, we're coming into the fall. Sage Library is haunted.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
I mean, there's some great haunting stories at Sage Library. But the other piece is, because it's the county system, there's a branch in Auburn, there's a branch in Pinconning. And so you really, when you get into the smaller communities, understand the role the libraries play.
Yeah,
and so
true.
the library board was a fantastic entrance into the community. I loved it.
Along with the library board, what else did you get your hands in?
Well, I'm a Rotarian.
Okay.
So Rotary is, for anybody who doesn't know what Rotary is, it's basically a service club. So you get to do stuff out in the community, but you also have lunch every Tuesday with people you like.
Rotarians are like, they're in it, man.
Yeah,
they are enthusiastic. They're like, I'm a Rotarian. Hey, do you want to join?
I joined Rotary to meet people, and then I got on it and realized the Rotarians internationally helped end polio.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's a big deal.
It's a big deal. They do big deal things.
Yeah.
I'm a member of St. Boniface in the All Saints Parish. So my husband and I have been involved in the parish for a long time. All of our kids were baptized there. So my favorite is for years and years, I taught the children's liturgy, where you pull the kids out during Mass and sit and chat with them. And the funniest thing to me is that kids will tell you anything when they're like, I got to get out of the services, and so I would hear all of these stories from these little kids who I would just pretty sure Mom and Dad don't want you telling me this story.
Yep,
but they're so fun.
It's absolutely the truth. I remember that from the classroom, kids coming into the class and say, well I think this, and I'm like, okay, maybe we should just keep that to ourselves.
right.
So you're so focused on kids, and we'll get into some of the things that you've done specifically for kids and family. Where does that come from? Did you have a big family growing up, or where does the focus on kids and childcare and education come from?
So I started my career doing campaign politics. And to be really honest, it was, when you're involved in campaigns, it's fast and there's all kinds of stuff going on all the time. And it's one of those perfect jobs for your 20s. But then I got to this place that I realized I was getting people elected I wouldn't vote for.
Oh,
and
interesting.
And I just stopped and thought, what can I do where I get up every day and think that this matters? And I saw this posting to run the State Association for Head Start. So Head Start's a free preschool program. It's been around since the late 60s. The cool thing about Head Start is that the board that makes the decisions, hires and fires the directors, approves the budget, are parents who are living in poverty and actively parenting a toddler, which is about as much stress as any one person can handle, right?
Oh my goodness.
And so I was not qualified in any way, shape, or form. They wanted a master's degree in child development, 10 years of experience in Head Start, and I have no idea how I ended up with an interview. But I got an interview and spent 2 hours explaining to the board that what they thought they needed wasn't what they needed, and what they did need was me. And I talked my way into that job.
Oh, wow.
And I just learned so much about the power of community voice, the power of programs, policies, government. What happens when you have the people that are impacted at the table making the decision? And then I also learned the power of de-stressing by pulling a kid into your lap and reading a book, right?
Yep.
So much shifts down the road when we invest in what's happening with our kids. So it started my career on that path, and have never really walked away from that emphasis on how do we fix things now for kids. We have a lot of kids who are really hurting, and how do we look to the future to make sure where they're headed is a good place.
I love kids. I mean, kids are just the best. I think back to teaching, the hardest part for me to leave teaching was leaving the kids. I mean, you're just surrounded by kids all day, and with kids, there's no ego. Like kids are kids. Like, they're going to be who they are, and you can have a situation in class, and there's conflict, and then you go out to recess, and they're like, "Hey, Mr. Ike, do you want to play Foursquare with me?" Like, heck yeah, I do. Whereas adults, like, there's baggage, and you don't look at somebody right, and 7 years later, they're like, "Well, I thought we were fighting because you didn't say hi to me at Meyer." But I'm like, man, like, we can learn so much as adults just by interacting with kids?
One of the turning points for me, it was for about 10 years I worked for a children's foundation in Detroit. It's called the Skillman Foundation. Embedded in the neighborhoods, embedded in the schools. It was just an incredible experience. And we would have kids at the table a lot, and mostly adolescents, in helping us think about where to put our dollars and how to craft our strategies. And we were talking to this young kid. He might have been 15, 16 years old. And his father had been sent to prison when he was very young, under 10. And his parents were just unreliable. And he was bumping from house to house, was homeless for a bit, trying to figure out how to navigate the education system, get himself a high school diploma, go some forward. And he said, nobody loved me. I had to figure out how to love me. And I thought that it struck me so deeply because, one, what an amazing thing at that age that this kid was able to figure out how to do. But more importantly, the multiple ways that we as a society had failed this kid at every single level, and how many others like him that exist right here in Bay City, that we have to do better. And shortly after that, I left the foundation. I was living in Bay City, driving to Detroit every single day.
Wow.
Oh yeah, I was a road warrior.
Yikes.
Yeah.
That's such a drive.
It's such a drive.
Oh my goodness.
4.5 hour round trip.
Oh goodness gracious.
But it just really mattered. And what's important to me is that when I get home at the end of the day, I can say it mattered that I went to work.
Yeah.
So I just came back moved back here and ended up running a network of community centers in Midland, which is directly working with kids. Yeah. Which was fantastic. So
awesome.
I just figure out, my career goals have always been, how do we shift things to be better, and where's the most powerful place I can put myself with my talents, with my gifts, to be in that spot in order to make that happen.
Yeah. And let's work our way there. So what led you to want to become a Bay City commissioner?
Well, I'll just be honest. The commissioner that was representing me was not showing up. He wasn't coming to most of the meetings. He wasn't. And the thing about the city commission is that it's directly connected literally to your neighbors. So the city deals with things like trash removal and snow removal and our water and our electricity, the things that make our lives run. And it's the city commission. And if the city is running well and the city commission is doing its job, people have faith that government can work. Yeah. And when they're not, it breeds this cynicism and awfulness and how people think about government in general, which is frankly at an all-time low right now. But I looked at that, and there were people that weren't friends, but people that I knew and admired that were serving on the city commission. And I thought, I can do that. I can make the time to do that. But I just found it to be this amazing experience that when I wanted to have conversations with my constituents, I would walk out my door and go next door or walk around the block. And it was really an opportunity to really get to know the city and get to know what's happening inside our government at a very different level. It was the first time I did a little work on the Charter Commission, but it was the first real elected experience that I had. Yeah.
I hear that so often from every single person involved in community work in some way, that the reward is you get to see the changes happen. Because as you get to the more and more removed, you become more of the back end, and you're doing something and you know that the change is happening, but you don't get to walk out your door and see a happier neighbor or talk to somebody and like, thanks for getting that handled for me. Or you don't get to see a school function better, a library, anything like that. You know that's happening, but you don't get to see it with your two eyes. And person after person says, like, that's the reward, is that you can walk out into the street and somebody says, hey, I have this issue, and then you can go and solve the issue for them. And it can happen relatively quickly sometimes at the local level. Like, you can say, hey, that trash isn't getting picked up, and then tomorrow the trash gets picked up, and then it gets picked up every single week. And so the capacity for immediate change, I think, is huge.
Yeah, I mean, well, and it's also just the practical nature of it. Yep. So I had a resident call me and say, listen, I can't get my garbage to the curb. I've just had the surgery. Is there anything that we can do? So it's easy for me to walk 4 doors down and just take the garbage out to the curb. But it's also, you're making this phone call in your city government, watching. I think the city gets a bad rep on a lot of things, but I have watched city employees do over and above for residents, including in that case being the people who walked up and got the garbage bins and took them out to the truck until the resident recovered, right? Just this notion of these are people that you know. And it reminds me of the the love that I have for this city and the way that we are here. And I like to tell this story about, so my husband and I, we're a blended family together. We have 6 kids. And our youngest, Elijah, he is 13. But when I was pregnant with him, he was extremely rude and almost 2 weeks overdue, right? So I'm a small woman, right? I was enormous. And so
here's the question. Did you love were you in the camp of you loved being pregnant or you hated being pregnant?
I am not a fan. Not a fan.
Yeah, that's 100% my wife. She's
Right.
like, I hate this. I just want the baby.
Right. It's about the baby. Can we just all? My husband used to at the very end of my pregnancy, I was addicted to the lobster bisque at Super Cafe.
Oh yeah.
And he would basically walk into the kitchen. He would set it on the counter and then slowly back away. Right. But I remember in that time of you don't sleep, and we had this giant family, and so I was wandering around the house, and finally I just said, look, I'm going to go get groceries. Mm-hmm. So thank God for Meijer being open 24 hours. Yep. I think it was 5:00 in the morning. I just headed out, was getting groceries. When I did that, gigantic pregnant, 3 times while I was getting groceries with 3 different people, someone pulled something off a shelf for me. Someone helped me move my groceries. Someone came out to the car and helped me load them. Wow. None of those people knew me, not one, right? And so I'm connecting that story to service on the city commission because it's just an elevation of that. But in this community, in this county, really, we do for each other. We do it in a practical way. We don't always do it with a lot of flourish in our words, but it's a practical thing, and it's how we take care of one another. And so to me, public service, whether it's the city commission or even where I sit right now, is just an extension of that. And how do we be in relationship with one another and figure things out together? And it is why I just really love it and feel very honored by my ability to do it. But it's the community that makes it special.
I love that you say this because I've been thinking about this a lot over the past couple of weeks, this idea of acts of care within a community and how like we all, regardless of your political leanings, regardless of your demographics or class or whatever, like we all want a better community. And in a lot of ways, that's really complicated. I mean, there's lots and lots of people and lots of issues. And you want to think about like a complicated machine. Imagine 103,000 people in Bay County, all different opinions, all different needs, all different experiences, all different things. But at the base level, we could wake up tomorrow and immediately have a better community if we focus on these acts of care. And the thing that really got me going on this was my 4-year-old Evelyn. She, a couple weeks ago, was like, Dad, I just want to show you some comfort and love.
Oh.
And I was like, oh, that's so sweet, honey. And like we hugged and like we cuddled on the couch. And she kept repeating this over the course of the day. And that became like our theme of the day. It's like, how do we show the twins comfort and love? How do we show mom comfort and love? And then we all got together as a family and like we wanted to show comfort and love. And I just thought about what a beautiful example that could be for us within our community is like we really double down on this idea of showing people comfort and love, because man, we are stressed out, not just here, but like across the world. And all we really want is to be seen and to be heard and feel important. And we can give that to anybody immediately, taking out their groceries to the car. And it just, I love that you say that because that's it. That's community.
It is
I
community.
care for you. You care for me. Our lives are better.
Well, all over the place, the little free libraries are an example of that, right?
Oh,
Just like, hey, I love this book. Let me put this book in here so other people can experience it. And Midland does this thing called neighboring. Yes. So they have neighboring week.
Tell me about that.
So I just love it. Maureen Donker, the mayor of Midland, has been a big force behind it. But she designates a day, a week, and says, just take care of your neighbor. And so it's everything from just walking over a plate of cookies, doing little small acts of, hey, I see you, and here's something to brighten your day. And they do it across the city for an entire week. And awesome. It's just wonderful, right? In politics, we see it feels worse than it has ever been in terms of the vitriol and the awfulness and the people just really hating one another. And I think that we have started to invest. This time I heard this term that I'm using, I stole it, but now I'm going to use it forever. But this notion of angertainment, right? So we get to this place where it becomes fun to watch people that we don't know tear down other people that we don't know. But that's what manifests into our community. And so we've got this presidential election coming, and regardless of which side you end up on, I know the last time there was a presidential election, I was a city commissioner. I had residents getting into fistfights over their yard signs. This notion of pitting one against each other. So I'm just on a little bit of a mission to say to folks, politics doesn't have to be this way. It's like this because we agree to participate in that nonsense. And so if we step back and just understand that we all want things better, we all want to do for our community. Everybody wants our kids to succeed. Maybe a little comfort and love. Again, you might not like the yard sign that your neighbor has, but you can see that they care about their kids. They worry about their mortgage. At our core, we're all the same. So it comes down to this relationship, which I think those small acts, whether it's a book in a library or a plate of cookies, feel free. Most people know where I live. Drop off cookies. Totally into that.
Same. Right. So, Bay City Commissioner, had you always wanted to pursue becoming a senator, or did that? No. Okay, so how did that jump happen?
So I have been increasingly concerned with the direction of state policy, and they're watching conversations about education have nothing to do with the actual education of our kids. Knowing that I have a master's degree in education. At one point in time, I was the chief of staff at the State Department of Education. I spent a lot of time in that space. Our educational outcomes are declining, right? We used to be one of the top states in the country. Now we're 38th, in some cases 48th in our outcomes. And the debate was around books in a library, which was really tough for me to watch. And really, as we started to see, the media job I had before I went into the state senate was I was a vice president of an economic public policy think tank, which is sounds very cerebral, but essentially just trying to think about what policies that we're putting in place that are helping our quality of life grow. So we have 80% of our jobs in this region are low wage. That didn't used to be true. We're struggling with our educational outcomes. That didn't used to be true. Where my kid, all of them, doing active shooter drills. Right? That certainly didn't used to be true. So there were so many things that felt like we were headed in the wrong direction. And I was approached by an old friend who was a state senator already. And he drove up and said, there's a new district line and it's going to be a really tough seat to win. And we think you can win it. And that has the potential to change who determines the policy in the state senate. So I thought long and actually first I said, no, thank you. No, thank you. But let me help you find someone, right? Let me help you find someone. Because I knew this is not a great time to run for office. I knew what that was going to mean. I knew how hard that was going to be on my family. I knew how ugly it was going to get. I went into it eyes wide open. I was a little naive because it was much uglier than I thought it was going to be. But at the end of the day, those core things about our schools and trying to bring high wage jobs into our community and protecting women's reproductive rights and thinking about sensible legislation to deal with gun violence, not a rabid progressive agenda by any means, but just these common sense things that overwhelmingly people in our community support were not what was coming forward in the candidates that were running. And I just felt a responsibility to do it. And after considering it and talking for a long time, I thought this may be my moment right now to be in that place using my skills to be able to move things that I've spent my life working on.
I want to bring up something that we were talking about before we hit record. In that, I just want to give a shout out to local elected officials, state elected officials, national elected officials, because like it gets intense, man. Like I am a person, and I use this phrase, like my skin is transparent. It is so thin. Like the idea of being in a public position like that and subjected to so much negativity, I mean, that just terrifies me.
Yeah.
And so like I want to give a shout out to everybody that looks at these positions and says, you know what? I know it's going to be intense, but here's a chance for me to do something good for my community. And I think regardless of whether or not you actually do that, or what, like who you are, what your politics are, whether you're effective or not, I mean, just that mentality of I'm going to do something tough to help the people who are around me. Like we need more of that. And we're fortunate here in this community that we have a lot of it. But I want to give a public shout out to everybody that is like, hey, you know what? This is going to be tough on me, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Right.
It's awesome.
Yeah, Democrat or Republican, partisan, nonpartisan, the vast majority of people that I interact with in elected office are good people who are just trying to make the community better, make the state better. We have different ideas about how to get that done. I still think it doesn't have to be this awful, right? We can figure out how it's not this awful. It was uglier than I thought. So everybody started up on TV in my campaign before Labor Day, and 20 some pieces of mail. I mean, I got to the point where I can't believe people were even reading all of these things that both of the campaigns put out. And you take a lot of swipes. And at the end of the day, you're still a human being, and they still worry you, they still wound you. But if on the flip side, you are able to do something that really matters. So I had spent 2 years working on the Working Families Tax Credit, which is game-changing money for people who are low income. And in our community, that's most people, right? And we had set at a really small amount. It's a rebate you get at tax time. The first thing I was able to do, the very first thing in taking office, was to testify in front of the very first committee hearing was on the earned income tax credit. And we were able to quadruple that, which is $500 million of tax relief for essentially the working poor. We were able to protect LGBTQ from discrimination and amendments to the Elliott-Larsen Act. We were able to restore workers' rights. These things that just really matter, that have this documented research and proof that turn people's lives around, make things better for people, then it's worth standing up for, right? But I certainly am never going to say that it's not hard. And the piece that I think was surprising to me is that it didn't really stop when the campaign ended. So most folks know I still have a tracker that follows me around, videoing everything I do, which is for the first 3 months, it was a really big guy dressed all in black, and he would come out of dark places and yell things at me. And that was about intimidation. That's ended, which is terrific. And now I have these sort of benign, very young kids who just follow me around with a camera. And I'm like, I'm a mom, 6 kids. I'm like, okay, thanks. Yeah. Hey, honey, did you eat today? Do you need a sandwich?
At least you're not dressed in black and yelling at me.
Right, so. Right. So we'll just fold you right in and get you a cup of coffee. But it's mostly it's this space, and the state senate is this very formal place. My husband always refers to it as the library, which is
you fit right in.
I fit right in. There's gigantic leather chairs, and
I've come full circle.
Yeah, exactly. Although I can't read a book on the floor, but maybe some point. But you do those things, and that's the job, is to sit in those big chairs and press a button with your vote. But the best part of this job is the time that we're in the community, and at the community kickball tournament or the St. Patrick's Day parade, and at some point I might run the race again. But the talking to folks about what's happening and being able to, one Sunday a month I go and worship in the African American churches in Saginaw. And so being into a space where you're worshiping alongside people and you're participating in their joy and their sorrow, there's a lot of amazing people coming together to do things in a community. So that's everything from small meetings with pastors to marches down Gratiot. And that's the space that makes this job just incredible, and why all of it's worth it, and why I'm glad I said yes last year.
Yeah, the people. We have such incredible people here in Bay County. And I want to give a shout out to Saginaw too, because I know them very deeply. And we are so fortunate here in Bay County to be so close to the people of Saginaw, because they're some of the greatest human beings on the face of the planet, having challenges just like every community has challenges. But man, when you go to the community kickball and it feels like a giant family reunion with 5,000 people, when you see people who care so deeply about their community that they're volunteering their time on everything, that they're reaching into the youth, I mean, it's very inspirational. And I love it. It sounds like the way that you as a human cope with the negativity that comes with being a politician is by redirecting yourself on people. And that for me in my work has always been the source of strength is, man, things get really tough. And then you look at a photo of a kid who just won a national championship boxing tournament and got to do it for Nayeli, and like these people are essentially counting on you to advocate for them and talking about like the earned income tax credit, trying to help people out of a really tough situation. They need that. They need that kind of advocate who's willing to go into the fire and say, you know what, this is going to be tough on me, but we can do this and we can help so many people in the process.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And although I don't want it to seem heroic, because it certainly isn't, right? We've been doing this from the very beginning as a coalition of people. And in our office, we are constantly saying it's we, not me. We walk together in everything that we do. We, during the campaign, knocked on 75,000 doors. We're back on the doors now, knocking on people's doors. It's really interesting when you knock on someone's door and you're not running for anything. You're just, I just say, hey, I'm Kristen, I'm new. I just want to know if you need anything. Here's how you get a hold of me. They do look at me a little like I'm crazy, but that's the point where when you're sitting on someone's front porch and talking to them about what we can get done, but that it's just extraordinary. I mean, it's an incredible experience to be able to make that happen and to be able to bring people along to do it. And that is my favorite part of the job. But getting back to Saginaw, very few people realize that the parks in Saginaw are mostly kept up by volunteers. There's no Parks and Rec department in the city of Saginaw. It's the community that keeps those parks alive. And the spirit and hope and grit of people across that city and frankly across the county is so like what we are like here in Bay County. And it's like you can get from one place to the next in 10 minutes. They're not, we're the same community.
Yeah, we have a similar spirit. Yeah. Cut from different cloths, different cultures. Obviously, every community has different kinds of cultures, but coming from a similar place, and that's exciting every day. We just mentioned the earned income tax credit. I'm interested to hear some of your other recaps from 8 months. Have you been? Yeah, okay.
8 months,
about 8 months or so. Everybody's curious, like what's going on? What kinds of things are you up to? So what kinds of things have you been up to other than the earned income tax credit?
Yeah, and then I also want to tell you what I'm doing in the fall because I've got a couple of things I'm pretty excited about.
Okay, let's do the past first, and then we'll go into the future.
So we immediately, the first thing that we did, and people have forgotten, but was over $1 billion of tax relief. So the earned income tax credit, which was the big piece for me, also the repeal of the retirement tax. So people don't really realize how many of our seniors are financially really struggling, and that tax relief mattered a lot. And temporary rollback of the income tax. So the pandemic was really hard on our families, and we needed to figure out how to get more money in people's pockets, just plain and simple. So that most of that tax relief will be felt this year because it doesn't go into effect immediately. We were able to repeal some laws that were on the books that just shouldn't be there. So one of them is there was a very restrictive reproductive rights law, the 1931 law, that was made criminals of women and doctors and forbid on reproductive rights. That we repealed we banned child marriage. There was a law allowing child marriage on the books. So we banned child marriage.
Really?
Yeah. Shockingly.
Wild.
Not an anonymous vote either. So that was that moment where I looked up at the board and there were some no votes on that, a couple of them, and I thought,
interesting. Okay.
But we had a law that banned cohabitation. So took that off the books. But more importantly, restored a lot of workers' rights that were part of the fabric of who we are in Michigan. So prevailing wage, making sure that a right to organize was restored. We amended the Civil Rights Act to protect LGBTQ. But the big pieces that I think were important to me, my first public act, the first law with my name on it, was about a package of bills to prevent gun violence. So requiring safe storage of firearms, putting in place what's called a extreme risk protection order. So if somebody is of a danger to themselves or someone else, creating a process that you can temporarily remove guns from the premises. I mean, not permanently, but it's a temporary measure. And then universal background checks. That was an emotional moment when we were able to pass that on to the governor. But the budget, this year's budget, is historic investments in education. It's at its core is an education budget. It puts funding for mental health counselors and nurses for our schools, free lunch and breakfast for every kid in the state. The kinds of things that I think are going to be game changing and we're in the process. I sit on the education committee of figuring out how to put more power back in the hands of teachers in the way that they teach, having the state not be so rigid in how that gets done, being able to ensure that we've got local control and local decision making staying at the school board, and making sure that schools have the resources they need. So the budget was a very big thing. I felt really proud to be able to bring back about $175 million for my district in this region in infrastructure, education, and economic development, including the boring things that matter, like the repaving of State Park Drive. So,
Meanwhile, everyone's,
yeah, right. It is funny because everybody wanted to fix the damn roads, and now everybody's mad that there's so much construction. But
the double-edged sword of making stuff happen. Like you gotta lose it for a little bit, and if you want to fix,
but you know what? Just the small bit they fixed on US 10, trying to leave Bay City and get onto 75.
Yeah.
That used to feel like you were on a roller coaster.
It's true.
It's beautifully
That's
smooth.
true.
So
Yeah.
we're doing all those kinds of things that matter. But in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be introducing a package that I'm going to talk more publicly about, but really about recess.
Oh, really?
Yes. So I thought this one would appeal to you. So
Can you tell me more about
we
this?
have so many kids across the state who have lost recess in the name of further instructional time.
Yeah.
And again, I'm a mom of 6 kids and have one of my kids and many of kids I love who have been trying to work through things like ADHD and try to be in a classroom. I've been in a kindergarten classroom, not in our region, I've been in a kindergarten classroom in April where there was only one recess. And ADHD or not, you take 5-year-olds and give them one recess.
Goodness gracious.
Right. It's just, so we know that kids learn in all kinds of ways, but one of the ways they learn is by moving their body, and you can do all kinds of things with recess time that helps in the curriculum, that helps kids learn. So why we should be able to count that as instructional time.
Yeah, this is my opinion, public, but 100%. Looking at it was always the highlight of my day in the classroom, art class and recess, because here are these situations where it's organic, where you've created essentially a playground for them to explore. Like there are rules, like please don't jump off the top of the monkey bars.
Right.
Like there's a rule. But at the same time, like you've created this framework for kids to explore and to interact and even conflict too. Like
Exactly.
It was always my rule when I saw 2 kids in a conflict was to count to 50. Because you got to give people a chance to like work this out, and they get in a fight and they come running to me and like, have you guys talked about this? Like, if not, you need to go away from me and you need to talk about this. And that's an opportunity.
And that's never going to happen inside the.
It's never going to happen.
It happens, and when we know that kids need, that you've heard of the 6 C's, that kids need to be successful, right? Collaboration, communication, critical thinking.
Yep.
We get really heavy on content in Michigan, but don't provide a whole lot of places for kids to learn the other 5 C's.
Yep.
They learn that at recess. So my bill will allow us to count that as instructional time. But the other thing, and this one I feel really strongly about, is banning the practice of removing recess for punitive reasons. Because you see kids that are maybe think differently or learn differently and are told they have to stay in from recess because they didn't finish the worksheet or they were disruptive in some way, which is the exact opposite of what any sort of research says that kids need. I mean, so we're gonna stop that practice. But so so that's coming, right? I just really love doing that, and we'll be releasing detail about that in the next couple of weeks. We are the big piece that have been championing for decades now. We're in the middle of a childcare crisis. It's impossible to find childcare.
It's impossible.
Yeah, most of the places throughout the district that are still open, and we've lost over half of our childcare businesses, have wait lists that are over 2 years. Many of people just stopped. Right. I have this joke that's actually not that funny, but that if you go on a first date and you like each other, you need to get on a list for child.
Just in case. This gets serious. What are you looking for in a child care provider?
Right. That's exactly it. I mean, we're really at that point, and it's going to require so much investment. And so we're making really good progress on the governor's initiative for pre-K for all. So every kid in a preschool classroom, but the next step is child care for all. And I've got a package of bills that we're going to introduce in the fall to help with that. But we're going to have to invest some considerable state resources to make it happen. We have most child care providers don't make more than $16 an hour. We know that 1 in every 5 child care childcare professionals lives in poverty, and 40% of them are eligible for at least one public benefit.
Really?
So when we're asking people to dedicate their lives to our most vulnerable kids and actually work in a space that one grows at the place where the brain is developing, and we know that this is the time where neurons are connecting and kids, everything's coming alive for kids. And it also enabling parents to work that powers our economy, and we are keeping professionals in a state of poverty in order to do this job. We have to fix it. So the business model is broken, and we are going to need to pivot substantial state resources into helping our childcare. And so I'm advocating for that.
It's interesting because you see the economic effects of that on both the childcare provider, but then also these families who are also looking for childcare, because so many families are in situations where maybe one spouse is working simply to pay for childcare, or that doesn't make any sense for our family, so I just won't work so that I can provide this childcare. And so you see this situation forcing certain decisions that people might not have made otherwise. And so they're either entering or leaving the workforce based solely on this. Well, we have to pay for this, or we don't have to pay for this, or whatever the situation is. And need some help.
Yeah, and we have so many employers that have a workforce shortage.
Yep.
And I hear people say, well, people just don't want to work. Well, people need to be able to work. And there are some things that we can do to help that. We've seen a lot of women drop out of the workforce and have not been able to come back after the pandemic. It's not exclusively a woman's issue. It's obviously a parenting issue. But there are a couple of things that we know right now, that 60% of jobs in Michigan pay less than $47,000 a year. So, if you just really wrap your head around a job that pays $47,000 a year and the average cost of childcare being between $12,000 and $14,000. We have families that are paying 40, 50% of their take-home pay to childcare. And at the same time, the childcare business is impossible to run in a way that pays livable wages for the staff. So there's simply no way to do this without some public investment into childcare to make it easier. And it's just a matter of priorities. If this is important, then we can figure out a way to fund it.
Yeah, we just ran a great interview with Nicole Luzak over at the United Way, and she talked specifically about the Alice population. And she gave a great example about a woman that she knew. She got a $2 an hour raise, a promotion at work, and for most of us, we think like, yeah, this is great. You got a raise and you got a promotion. This is great. But what ended up happening was that disqualified her from childcare assistance, and it's called the benefit cliff. And so all of a sudden you're making more money, which on the surface sounds great. This is what we all want. But it wasn't enough to cut that $80 an hour or a week extra wasn't enough to cover the childcare cost. And so now she's in this weird situation where there isn't government assistance that can specifically cover that for her. And so she had to approach the United Way and say, look, this is my situation. Can you help? And thankfully we have the United Way, and they were able to step in and help. But you have this situation where it's not just, well, you made $47,000, and that means that you should be able to do all of these things, because it's considerably more complicated than just that.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And quite frankly, we've been asking our community organizations like the United Ways to pick up the slack on this for too long. And thank God we have the United Ways. And Nicole is wonderful.
She's wonderful.
But that's not the solution, right? That should be emergency aid. It can't be the way the whole system works. So we know that most kids under the age of 5 have both parents in the workforce. And we need both parents in the workforce for the most part. I mad respect for parents who decide to stay home.
You guys are awesome.
Yeah, right.
My goodness.
Right. I do enjoy a quiet cup of coffee at my desk, right?
Yes. I mean, I love my kids. Love you guys.
Right. I think we found in the pandemic how hard that is, that life is. Both my sisters were stay-at-home moms for a while, and I mean, it's tough, but we need to be able to get folks back in the workforce, and we're not going to do that till we fix childcare. So I know the governor is making some major announcement about where her priorities are, and I'm just going to work really hard to keep childcare as a part of the priorities.
Very cool. Last kind of thing, looking in the future, tell me about missing middle housing.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about that.
Here's what's interesting there's so many things about the missing middle, but
Wait, before you begin, can we define missing
Yes.
middle housing? Because we should do that.
No, I've got the,
Okay.
so I'm a child, grew up in the 80s, right? Was born in 1970, grew up in the 80s. And I remember coming up, people would always say, the rules of life are an engagement ring should be 2 months' salary and your house should be 2 years' salary. Okay.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that was true. It was true in the 80s. Show me a house you can buy for 2 years' salary, right? That's the missing middle, right? Those are when you're looking at something that should be 2 to 3 years of a salary, 2 years of a salary, that is what used to be considered reasonable for a home. And it's not possible anymore. So I'm watching my adult kids. They've given up. Some of them have just given up on ever being able to buy a house because it's just not available. So there's a lot of money out there for housing. And MISHA, which is the organization in Lansing that sort of guides all of our housing policy, they have all of these funds, but they're really restricted. They'll say you can spend this in this specific way, in this specific area. So we've been moving on. I've got legislation that left the Senate. It's on its way. It's at the House. We're hoping for movement in the fall that starts to loosen up some of the boundaries around that allow for them to particularly start to invest in development of missing middle housing.
Very cool.
At some point, we've got this, when you're a newbie legislator, before you take office, they invite you to these orientations. It's just like new employee training, like everybody else gets.
Yeah, right.
And I will never forget. I was in this room with all of the newbie House and Senate members. We're all a little wide-eyed, wondering what we got ourselves into.
Right.
And they do this opener and say, "What is the number one issue that you heard from constituents coming in? Like, what are your voters caring about? What are your residents caring about?" And Republican or Democrat, rural, urban, 80% of us said housing. That is the place that is just breaking the back of most folks in Michigan. And what people really want, what we would like, to me, this is Bay County, right? What the real dream is, can you own a home? Can you raise your kids? Can you save for retirement? And can you go to Disney World every once in a while, right?
Yeah,
That's what we all want to do. And that dream is out of reach for most of us right now. So I think we've got to start by seeding development to make the development of missing middle housing, of most people housing, which is what missing middle is, like most people housing.
Yeah, right.
We've got to make the development of that economically viable. We have to make it so that it's something that developers want to do.
Well, I interviewed a council member over in Midland, and she used the phrase attainable housing.
Yeah.
And I love that because like the phrase affordable housing can mean different things to different people, and it can carry baggage that is unintended. But the idea of like attainable housing, if I'm a graduate from college, our community should have some kind of housing for you, because if we don't, you're going to find another community to go to. Or if you are a retiree, we should have housing for you. If you are at different income levels, we should have housing that's available and attractive to you. I mean, that's the infrastructure of our communities, and it's so important. I mean, and this is not just a district issue or a Great Lakes Bay region issue. This is across the country kind of issue. This idea of over time we have created housing and we've neglected a really critical middle piece for this, and different variations of housing other than just single family homes. And what can we do to fill in that gap? It's a challenge. It's a complicated machine.
Here's the thing. I mean, we could do a whole nother podcast on economic policy, but here's where I think we have failed in our economic policy. So Michigan is losing population. The governor's talking about it. The legislature's talking about it. We have to do something. The big sort of existential threat is that we are getting older, right? And if we don't get younger, our communities are going to die. It's just that simple.
It's math.
It's math, right? We have not paid enough attention to how we need to invest and what we need to do in order to keep young people who are growing up here to stay here, and how we attract young people to come and live here. And housing plays a huge role in that. So a couple of my kids graduated and they're like, "Okay, what are you going to do now?" "Well, I'm moving. I'm going to move to downtown Detroit." Like, no, you're not. You can't afford to go anywhere near that. Right? But you know where you can afford, they're looking at some of the lofts in downtown, and there's these cool places to be, but we need to have more and we need to have the jobs for high-paying jobs that young people want to be here for. But it's got to be this space where they know they can latch onto that dream of being able to own their own place and do it in a way that doesn't mean they have to eat ramen every night.
Yeah. Although I do like a good little teriyaki chicken ramen. I mean, you paid 25 cents for it. The bar is very low. So
You throw a boiled egg in there and it's all delicious.
Yeah, it's wow, I'm in a fancy ramen place. Like I got my little boiled egg. Yeah. Well, Kristen, I want to thank you for your service for our community. It's been a delightful chat. I mean, like watching you in public. We've never actually sat down and had a conversation, and so this is exciting for me on a personal level, and I think it's also important that for us as Hay Bay City to really get to know each other, and that includes business owners and volunteers and kids doing amazing things and our elected officials, because I mean, you're a gateway to a lot of potential in Lansing for us, and anything that we can do to really strengthen that relationship, regardless of what people's political leanings are, it can benefit everybody, and it's just so important to really get to know people, and this has been an absolute delight. So I want to thank you for spending your time. I know that you're busy doing political things, so to have you sitting here and talking to not just me but the entire community has been an absolute blessing.
Yeah, it's been fun. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Cut.